All right, hello, Midnighters. Welcome to this special edition of TIFF's new stay-at-home cinema series, Screening on Crave. My name is Peter Kaplowski, TIFF's Midnight Madness curator, and I'm broadcasting live from what I'm calling the Midnight Auditorium, which is just the corner of my apartment. Tonight, I will be standing on guard for one of my favorite films of 2019, one that I was very privileged to share at Midnight Madness last fall. It was a film that the brilliant writer-director Matthew Rankin is responsible for, and he will be joining us very shortly. I am, of course, talking about the bizarro biopic that perversely and hysterically reimagines the formative years of Canada's longest-running and perhaps strangest Prime Minister, Mr. William Lyon Mackenzie King. I am, of course, talking about the 20th century. Before we begin, a little bit about why we're doing this virtually, why we are not in a brick-and-mortar building like the TIFF Lightbox. By staying at home and crucially through social distancing and keeping our hands and home clean, we are reducing the spread of COVID-19 and flattening the curve, and we are all living in a dystopia movie. That's the one silver lining to all of this, is that we feel like we are characters in a dystopia science fiction film that might screen at Midnight Madness. You know, like Hardware or something like that. Less robots. But it is serious, and I hope everybody is staying safe and staying secure, and TIFF is attempting to do its part by collectively bringing people together for this special program of online streams that we're doing with Crave so that we can still experience the moving image together at home. And this epidemic really is affecting all of us, and so we want to also acknowledge the people who have been taking care of this land for thousands of years. I want to acknowledge that TIFF was built on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat. We are gosh darn grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and to support First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities by showing the works of Indigenous filmmakers. Now, Stay at Home Cinema, as I mentioned, is a partnership with Crave, and we're delighted to be working together to bring great movies all over to audiences all over Canada. I'm ecstatic that they've welcomed a film like the 20th Century into their catalog in particular. You can always have more Midnight Madness on your streamers, so thank you so much, Crave. And thank you to our partners, sponsors, major public supporters, lead sponsor Bell, major sponsor RBC, L'Oreal Paris and Visa, our major public supporters, the City of Toronto, the Ontario Arts Council, and also thank you, TIFF's many generous members and donors, everybody on the stream. We couldn't do what we do without you and our audience. And I just also want to salute Nobuhiko Oyashi, the director of one of the all-time great Midnight Madness movies. Not a Midnight Madness movie, but a midnight movie, Hausu. I'm wearing the shirt right now. He passed away this month, and if you've never seen Hausu, after you watch the 20th Century, seek it out. It'll change your life. And also special thanks to my roommate and videographer, Pierce Dirks, who is manning the board tonight. I'm lying, there's no board, but Pierce did help me set up the Midnight Auditorium, and I am very much appreciative. All right, let's make it midnight and begin to welcome our special guest tonight. Renowned for his mesmerizing gonzo biographical shorts, including Monowski, Death Plummet, and the Canadian Screen Award winner, The Tesla World Light, Matthew Rankin's debut feature, The 20th Century, double downs on his signature proclivities of historical and aesthetic abstraction, and he has conjured something that I've been known to declare as a veritable heritage minute from hell. So audiences at home, start smashing that heart icon. I'm going to attempt to awkwardly add him. Here we go. Works. My first time ever doing it. The movie is The 20th Century. Hey, Matthew!
Hey!
Awesome. This works. Technology.
Great to be here with you, Peter. Thank you.
It's fantastic to be here, too. You're in Winnipeg right now, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in the cryogenic city of my birth. And wow, it's so great to be here inside your phone with you, Peter.
Yeah, terrific. Likewise. I'm really trying to foster a public access atmosphere here with my backdrop. I hope it reminds you of a late night Winnipeg public access TV. That was sort of the vibe I'm going for.
Oh yeah, that was my favorite era of television, in fact. Yes.
I was just talking about heritage minutes, of course, as it always comes up with the film The 20th Century. And I didn't mean it in any sort of pejorative sense. I love heritage minutes, and I find them such unique objects. Were they an influence on this film?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, they're kind of they're an encounter that I guess Canadian people have with the past and they're serving a kind of nation building function. I feel like they're kind of creating images of Canada that sort of define the way people think about Canada and stuff like that. So this movie is, in a way, kind of inspired by them, but also trying to kind of, I don't know, poke them a little bit. My favorite. Someone once described this movie as a combo of a Murdoch mystery and Sallow, the 100 Days of Sodom, and that was kind of my favorite description of it.
That's a perfect description. I want to see that movie immediately, and I'm sure many people here do as well. Yeah, I mean, there's just something about, I feel like the cinema of English Canada doesn't so often investigate its own history, or even Canadian politics in the way that you do here. Can you point to sort of anything that might have existed beforehand that was an influence on, or did you sort of observe that there was an absence, and that was one of the motivating factors to tell a political story about Canada?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I guess there are a few there are a few films I can point to. I guess it's about, again, the infrastructure of how these images are created. The sort of I would say, like, lots of government propaganda was sort of an inspirational point. A lot of NFB films. I think of like the Donald Britton series, The Champions, is kind of a big impact. But I would say, more than anything else, I would say Quebec nationalist films were kind of a big influence on me. Pierre Falardeau was sort of his film Le Temps de Buffon was like a big impact. It's this big sort of nobody gets a break, curb stomping of Canadian politics, which was really kind of earth shattering to me as someone who grew up in Winnipeg, and I really sort of went down the line of sort of exploring Quebec nationalism and how Quebec had sort of been put itself on film. And I think that's something that Quebecers do really well is make images of themselves, even if those are images that only Quebecers will understand, perhaps. And I actually think that's why Quebec has become one of the great, cinematic cultures of the world, is because it has been so radically local that it's become something kind of universal, right? So I don't know, in English Canada we don't do that so much. We're not not so I don't know, not so brazen about image making, except these really safe ones, the ones that sort of tell you, hey, everything here is great, and there's no shortage of voices in Canada telling you how great Canada is, right? I mean, it's really
you describe Canada as kind of a bedtime story, and in many ways this film kind of operates as a nightmare to them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's the thing. Like, I sort of think, there's so much about our lives that are just stories we tell ourselves, right? Nationhood is one of these. This is a little story we tell, and sometimes that's something that can be very emancipating. Sometimes it can be utterly tyrannical. So the film is kind of playing with how we sort of narrate nationhood.
Yeah, I actually just realized that I think one of the first films I ever had the privilege to curate as a programmer was René Lévesque, your short film.
Oh, right, yeah.
A decade ago, yeah, which very much capitalizes on that kind of Quebecois propaganda imagery, I believe, in aspects of it. Great. The other thing that kind of made me think of was just how. How early was William Lyon Mackenzie King the subject for this kind of project? Was it a begin with King, or did it begin with a general desire to explore Canada's past and its history?
It's a little bit both. I think on what level I was really interested in sort of how would you say this in English? La mise en image du Canada, like the sort of how images are created, like systems of image making for what Canada is or what it might mean, but of course when you make a film, it comes from a personal place too, right? And Mackenzie King was just someone that I connected with personally.
You read his diaries, right?
That's right. I read his diary between 1897 and 1905 about. And I fell asleep a lot reading it, I have to admit. I would sort of doze off in the microfiche room, and I'd sort of wake up and I couldn't really remember if what I had retained was something that actually I had read, or if it was just something I dreamed, just contaminated by his diary.
I think
But
it's
I
so
think a
perfect.
diary is, yeah, but I think a diary is actually kind of like that. It's sort of, it's like a parallel consciousness. It's not like an objective historical record. It's you processing the chaos of your existence. And if, anyone who keeps a journal knows what a melodramatic and maudlin and ultimately very uncomfortable document it is. It's like a kind of a little closet of shame. At least my diary is like that. This was something I connected with Mackenzie King. I really saw a lot of myself in his confused, obsessive outpourings into his journal as a young person.
I love that you read it on microfiche. That almost seems so perfect that
I know.
that the texture and quality of that medium
Yeah.
to then read these stories and internalize these melodramas that Mackenzie King was experiencing, and then to then repurpose them back to film as images.
It's true. Microfiche is strange to work with because you can really get motion sickness moving through it. Like, they should really have like sanitary buckets in the microfiche room. It's like you can really get sick.
Well, there's an opportunity for people to tweet questions at us, and on the subject of images, one has come up. Ben White, TIFF member, asks, the film has a lot of influences of past great work such as German Expressionism, 1940s B-horror, etc. What were some of the challenges in recreating these amazing film influences while also preserving your style?
Yeah, I mean, part of that was the conceit of the movie. Like, a lot of people have seen German Expressionism in it. Myself, I feel like you can't really do German Expressionism in color. I sort of feel like the two kind of don't work together. But I see what people are saying. It's like, I would open the door a little bit more broadly. Like, I think that this movie is kind of following a line of, cinematic history, which I would call like the masters of artifice. Like, filmmakers who have really, really, rather than avoiding artifice, which is what we normally do when we make a movie, is we try to make it as real as possible, right? But there's this other kind of outsider line of a filmmaker that has really tried to sort of make an aesthetic virtue out of the fakeness of watching a movie. Like, the fakeness about it can really be ecstatic. Like, in that, I would think, certainly German expressionists are certainly part of that. But I would also say Karel Zeman was a big influence on me. Like, he made these like hybrid live action animated films. Fellini, very much, the later Fellini is all this. Guy Madden, some of the Lars von Trier films. I think of Europa by Lars von Trier is a big influence. So all of this sort of artifice, the idea of like embracing the artifice of cinema, making it even more fake than it would be, and that was. There was two things. Part of it was trying to make an aesthetic virtue out of my small budget, because I knew that if I tried to aspire to Spielbergian gloss, my budget would be, bleeding like a severed artery within, a couple of days. So, but I knew that if I like embraced the artifice, if I made it fake, if I didn't have any pretense of historical credibility, then I could do it, and then it would work. But the other thing is that was also part of the conceit of the film. Like, I really wanted people to be confronted by, the artificiality of Canada. Like, I wanted Canada to appear as this sort of almost architectural structure being grafted upon the natural world, right? So it was part of the historical argument of the thing, was trying to make it as fake as possible. But concretely, it was still tricky. We came up with this. The Denis Boivin, the art director, we came up with this idea of like recycling kind of the same set again and again and again. And every set you see in the movie is essentially the same set, transformed and redecorated. We saved a lot of money by doing that, but we had to kind of like rebuild the set every day and stuff. So it was a real fight. It was kind of a race against the clock every day.
What would you say was the most complicated? Like, was there ever a moment where you felt like you had reformatted and refashioned the set so many times that you were kind of left with what's our next option? Was there ever a wall that you guys hit in the production?
Yeah, I would say the whole ice maze sequence at the end of the film, which was created out of mirrors. I'm a big believer that, with each film I make, I like to feel like I'm relaunching the Hindenburg, knowing full well that it's going to explode. I like things to be really hard. Like, I like images that are difficult to create. But I was really, just making so much trouble for myself filming in a hall of mirrors. It's really hard, Peter. And we didn't have that many mirrors. We had to move them around for each shot. They were really,
but you
heavy.
Incredible compositions as a result of that. Like, there's this one sequence towards the end where you're zooming in what feels like 4 levels of mirrors.
Yeah.
Was that all achieved practically, or did you have to composite elements?
No, it was all achieved practically. Yeah, there are little things like that where we sort of noticed, we found shots. Vincent Beirne, the cinematographer, and myself, we would find these shots in these spaces. But it was really, really hard. I went to see an elder, a few months ago, who told me my spirit animal is a salmon, and I thought, well, that's kind of good, because it really felt like a spawning salmon making this movie. It was like, just every day, we had to hurl ourselves ridiculously upstream, really sort of preparing to just die in the effort, in the ultimate expression of creativity, right? But at a certain point, you're just making too much trouble for yourself. Anyway, definitely, yeah, shooting in mirrors is hard. I mean, everyone knows that, but that made me sort of want to do it more.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate it. It forces you to be creative and solve those problems. And the fact that you're not pinned down by realism means you have more options to solve the problems creatively.
Yeah.
You also have a lot of options too. What I love about the film is how flexible you can be with casting. You're not bound to the historical accuracy of race or gender, and it can be very freeing from a casting perspective. Could you speak to the casting of the film and how you kind of found the actors for their roles?
Yeah, sure. It was the casting is very non-binary, and there's a lot of intergender casting, and that's something that has been really remarked upon and discussed, and that's really exciting. I have to say, though, that when we were casting, that was just the most normal thing for me to do. I didn't really think about it too much. This just seemed completely normal to cast the right person for the role, sort of irrespective of, however they presented in their, normal human non-actorly life. And I was sort of excited about how, what sort of emerged from that. It sort of creates this space that kind of transcends, gender binaries, right? It's like, and I feel like that's sort of something that is actually very normal in theater, but in film, it's much more unusual.
Yeah, I see you mentioned that it kind of gives it a community theater spirit, which again, in no pejorative sense.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, no, I really like. That's it. I really like the school play approach to casting. We're like, there's a role for everybody, and we're all in this, and we're all doing it, and it's all great, right? Ki Chan, who plays Dr. Wakefield, the purity agent, anti-masturbation activist in the film.
Who's based in some true historical accuracy. I think people will be shocked at how much in this movie is accurate, as ridiculous as it seems.
That's very true. Yes, all of those anti-masturbation apparati that are in Dr. Wakefield's laboratory, they all really did exist. The alarm system, there was an anti-erection harness that would actually sound an alarm if, one was getting too impassioned. There was something called a cactus skin glove that actually did exist. It wasn't made out of cactus flesh, but chronic masturbators had to wear this glove. It was really kind of gothic and weird. It was made out of, leather with little cactus pricks on it. And it was chronic masturbators were forced to wear this so they would not masturbate.
Was that what inspired the cactus imagery? I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the film, but where did the image of the cactus come from, if you can dance around spoilers?
Sure. Yeah, a couple things sort of were synthesized in that cactus. There's in downtown Winnipeg, there's a mall called Portage Place Shopping Center, and it has this ejaculating fountain in it. This mall was built in 1987, 88. And Calum Vattenstall is a great author, Winnipeg author you may know. He's written a lot about Canadian horror films and stuff, and it's a really wonderful filmmaker as well. He once described Portage Place as having all the charm of a Berlin Wall. I really liked it. All of Portage Avenue was destroyed to build this mall, and some really kind of mean-spirited, cynical effort to just force poor people out of Winnipeg. And the center court, there's this fountain that ejaculates. It actually like spurts into the air, something like 5 stories, and entranced, hypnotized Winnipeggers for generations, and including myself. So I feel like that the cactus sort of emerged part out of that, part out of the cactus skin glove, my reading about this anti-masturbation device. And then there's a cactus in Archangel by Guy Madden where you hear it's sort of you hear like an explosion, and then the cactus sort of tips over, and then he cuts to this young boy with little Walt Disney dancing spiders on his nude torso. So I feel like that was probably contaminating my.
And I interrupted you earlier when you were telling an anecdote about Ki Chan. If you want to complete that thought now, so I apologize. I went on to masturbation.
Yes, how can we not? Yeah, Ki Chan, I met him at Sundance years ago, and I really liked him and really thought he was a really interesting actor. And I wrote that role for him. And Ki Chan is Han Chinese from Singapore, and we were discussing it, and we're like, well, should the character be Chinese? And we were like, well, it doesn't really make sense for him in 1899 to be Chinese. Like, it doesn't. Why would he be an anti-masturbation activist? That seems so Anglican and so Anglo-Saxon somehow. So anyway, we just decided that he was just this Anglo-Saxon white guy. So there's a lot of casting decisions that happen in the film that sort of transcend how shall I say, literal readings.
Well, we're running out of time before we can start the movie, but one thing I did want to ask is that you've had an opportunity now to watch the film with many different audiences, Canadian and international. Are you surprised at what the reactions have been on the national from the national side? Was there ever a concern that maybe this was too inside baseball, and that it would that these sort of thoughts that you had about Canadian identity wouldn't travel? I mean, for me, it always felt like when people have asked me, like, am I going to get it if I'm not from Canada? And I always say, do you laugh when you watch Monty Python but have no idea who Oliver Cromwell is? Like, it's,
sure,
it's so
that's right.
But I'm just wondering what your experience has been in sharing it with the world.
Yeah, well, before COVID broke, I only personally attended 2 international screenings, one in Mexico and one in Berlin. Mexico went over great, but of course there is a lot of cactus content in the film, so that's probably why. Berlin went over really great too. Wonderful, wonderful questions. The audience, my feeling was that their engagement was sort of twofold. I think first and foremost they engaged on the more philosophical end of the film. Like the film is sort of exploring early 21st century malaise, how ideas about leadership and politics, and how we can use politics to summon the worst and the best and the most compromised versions of ourselves. And I feel like that, those are ideas that are very much driving the thing that I don't think are necessarily, overwhelmingly Canadian by any means. And so their engagement was more philosophical. But I think, I think one of the great pleasures of every film, any film that we like, that we watch, is the encounter of something we don't know about. I mean, that's the essence. That's the pleasure of cinema, right? Is entering a world we don't know and having that strange narcotic encounter of it. So, and I feel like this movie is so, I mean, it is Canada, yes, and there are a few jokes that are, sort of schlepped out for the CanCon people, but it's also sort of this extraterrestrial version of Canada. So I feel like, everybody's kind of discovering it, even the Canadians,
Well, it's going to be our audience's time to discover it as well. I'm so thrilled. I can't wait to watch this again. You're going to be tweeting along, correct? Can you confirm the Twitter account you're going to be tweeting from?
Yes, I'm tweeting from, what's it called?
Made_new?
Yeah, that's right. Made_new at on Twitter. This is my maiden voyage on Twitter, Peter. I've never tweeted before. This will be my first tweet.
Don't stay for long. But I'd like to again remind everybody that we're going to start the film shortly. We had planned to start at 10:30. I'm going to say let's start at 10:35 just to get everybody a chance, warm up that popcorn, their maple walnut ice cream, get that on the table. And 10:35 p.m., go over to crave.ca, or if you've got a Crave cable package, I believe it's also available there if you go on demand. And we will start watching, for my money, one of the new great Canadian films, frankly. I've watched this film maybe a dozen times now, and I cannot wait to watch it all with everybody. And get those cactus emojis ready. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you online on Twitter.